Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Warner, to Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
And I write a column called The Albany Beat, and it talks about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. So that's what I started. I started writing for them, yes, recently. So today we have a very special guest with us, first time Senator Kathy Marchione. So welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you so much.
Senator, very good.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you.
You're Baptist, you're a religious person?
I am. I have great faith in God, yes.
Yeah, I got that from your background.
Yes, I do.
That guides your principles, that guides who you are.
Guides my life, absolutely does, yes.
Are you in a choir or something, or do you? What's your role with the Baptist Church?
It changes throughout the years. At one point, I was a drama director in our church, and we did beautiful plays at Easter time. And in a 4-day period of time, we would see 3,600 people coming in to see a beautiful play. I've also been the greeting coordinator for the church. I was involved in many aspects of heart-to-heart seminars for women, as well as a student of sign language. We had some deaf people in our church, and the church offered sign language, and I really felt that what a small community it would be for me if I were deaf and people weren't able to converse. So for many years, I took sign language, and was probably one of the nicest things that I ever did for myself, to be able to open up my world to speak to the deaf.
Well, I remember when Mario Cuomo was governor, and he would have a sign language interpreter there, and he would ask the sign language interpreter, show me how to say governor in sign language. And it's something like this. Like almost like crazy.
Yeah.
You wanna,
yeah. Well, I think a G, but it's been a number of years, and I actually don't know that for certain.
But he would joke with the interpreter to say,
it's just Mashigi over here.
Yeah.
I just want to say, it's a Jewish View. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the head of our movement, would always say that in order to be a good citizen, a person needs religion, which is really in a way contrary to what the normal aspect really is nowadays, because church and state should be separate. And really that, of course, you don't impose anybody's religion on everybody. Of course, that's the American way. But just to have a strong faith, like you're saying, in God, does really lead the country, and really leads the person, like Mark is saying, to the person and the country in the right direction. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. I agree with that. But I think we have a misconception of the separation of church and state. And my understanding of that is that when our country was founded, it was a practice that if you lived in New York and New York chose to be Baptist, then you needed to be Baptist. Or if you were Protestant and the separation of church and state said you cannot choose for your state what religion it is. That's a separation of church and state. Anyone can live anywhere, no matter what faith, whether they're Jewish, they're Christian, can live any place. That's a separation of church and state. I think we've taken it way too far, and I believe that we've taken God out of our lives and out of our schools, and I don't see any good that comes from that.
Totally agree with you. Very good. Excellent.
Well, regarding legislation that came up this year, and tying in with what you were just saying, how do you stand on the education investment tax credit?
Well, in January, I'm sure you remember, our conference approved that we passed the education tax credit.
Does that mean you voted for it?
We did.
You personally?
Yeah, I personally voted yes, of course.
All right. And I didn't want to presume.
Oh, yes, yes, I voted in favor of it, of course. I thought it was a good piece of legislation that just allowed people to give money, whether it was a parochial school, a public school, a charter school. You would be able to give money and get a tax credit for that. So I thought it treated all schools fairly, and I thought it was a very good thing.
What did you think of this? You don't have very much of a history. It's only your second term.
It's my second term.
And you were elected in 2013. What was your thoughts and your feeling about this past legislative session?
I thought that it was a difficult session. I think we accomplished a great deal, especially in light of what occurred. You know, first the Speaker of the House, then our own leader, and the difficulties that that causes in having to select a new leader in our House, for example, and I'm sure they experienced the same in the Assembly, and then holding it together that everyone then gets behind the leader, and you know, if you didn't support the leader, the one who won, can you get behind them, and can that leader get behind you? And I thought, and I can only speak for us in our House and the Senate, but I thought it went as smoothly as it possibly could. It was a very open process for us in our conference as we spoke out as to who we thought we would favor. But having 32 members of our conference, we needed every vote. So we actually talked about, before we would select who we felt should be our leader, that whoever won, we all would support. And that's a fair way to go forward, and that's what we did.
But overall, a lot of people were saying that this session was not productive, that it was, I mean, not just chaotic for the reasons you brought up, but because everything waited for the big ugly the last day when they had this omnibus bill that threw in everything but the kitchen sink that was left on the table. I mean, is this a way to do business? Do you like this style? Is this something that you're comfortable with?
I think that this year, I think that it was very difficult, as I said previous. In my world, as a senator, I'm chairman of local government. And I would like to think that the 125 pieces of legislation that went through my committee didn't go through in the last hour, that we worked very hard at making sure that the local government legislation that was important to our body got through systematically. I had 9 committee meetings, which is a lot of committee meetings for any committee, and brought forward a lot of good legislation. I think if you look at the record, you'll see that we passed the education tax credit in January. We passed the women's equality agenda in January or February. We went forward.
All but the 10th.
All but the 10th, right. That's exactly right. And we went forward. We had an on-time budget,
right,
which is the 5th consecutive on-time budget, my 3rd, but 5th consecutive on-time budget. And so I believe that we did move things along. I think there's a lot of controversy, and they always kind of get left to the end of session.
So what's the perception then? Why is there a perception that it was so chaotic and unproductive?
Well, I think it's just a perspective that, you know, maybe one that people have.
Or the media portrays?
Or the media portrays, and again, only being my 3rd year, you know, I don't have a great deal of experience to know in the session world what's good and what's not.
And that's where I prefaced this whole conversation. But in conference, I mean, I understand that, you know, you talk quite frankly in conference, and you know, everyone gets to vent. Do you vent, and what are your frustrations?
I speak my mind in conference. Yes, I do. A lot of what we talk about in conference truly isn't anything that we discuss outside of conference.
Oh, I thought I'd get you for that one.
I'm not that new.
You wanted a scoop.
You're not that new.
I'm not that new.
Mark wants a scoop.
Yeah, I'm not that new. But you know, you've been following. I think that the Second Amendments are very important. I'm glad that the 10th plank didn't get brought forward.
Which has to do with abortion.
Abortion, that, you know,
And
I'm not
what,
in favor
and
of
specifically, what was bothering you about it? What was that?
I think was a number of things. Certainly was an expansion of abortion. I believe into partial birth abortion, which I think 75% of the people believe is wrong. And, you know, beyond the expansion of abortion, I think it opened the way for non-doctors to perform abortions, which I think is a risk for women. So those are some of the reasons I would not want to see that occur.
Let me ask you on a topic that's outside of your district, but you might have heard brought up in conference or heard amongst your colleagues about the East Ramapo School District and the controversy. Does that set a bad precedent to have a non-elected overseer of a school board, elected school board, to have the right to override and to have that decision-making alternative to an elected board?
It's very contrary to how
And
we
you've heard
believe.
about this?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I have, and it is contrary to how our local school districts operate.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand that it's financially through an error financially that was made, that they're in very serious financial trouble. So I would certainly want to know more about it to see why it
Mark,
did
can I ask you
occur.
just a civics question from like an outsider? I'm the rabbi, but just that it needed the Senate approval also to override is not, I know the Assembly
And the
was for it.
governor's signature
Yes,
after both
it was
houses
a
would
very
approve it.
was a very
So
serious
because
issue
this,
for
because
them.
the Assembly passed it with 80 out of 7, they needed 76, they got 80 votes, but it didn't get brought up in the Senate, right?
I don't believe it did.
Right, okay. Do you if you had an overseer in the state Senate where they felt that things weren't going right, this is not the way to conduct business, that they could overrule.
We did. His name is Pete Barara.
Very good, very nice. Touche.
Eric Schneiderman.
That's right. So you,
You vote
Yeah.
for us. You're the overseer.
okay.
Truly.
But there's, but the school board it has an overseer, voters.
Yes, that's right.
So, but now there's a non-elected, the state education appointed overseer. If some group said this is the person who will make sure that the Senate is doing it, isn't that offensive?
It is offensive, but I also wonder how many times does the school fail, and what responsibilities do we have to our children? Do we allow that to continue? So again, I think, I don't know if Ramapo is failing or it's just financial, but there were some safeguards put into the governor's legislation that he would have liked to have seen, where if you were a failing school and an overseer was appointed. And I asked that question and really never got an answer to that about an overseer and how would that work, and do you just circumvent the entire process of an elected school board? Yeah.
So you wouldn't vote for this because it would set a dangerous precedent?
Oh, I think it does set a dangerous precedent, and I would want to know much more than I know before I could tell you in that instance whether I would vote or not vote for it. I know that the senator from down that way was very concerned and was
Dave
very
Carlucci.
interested. Yes,
Yes.
Senator was very interested in getting the legislation to the floor.
Okay.
But it never got to the floor.
Never got to the Senate floor.
So it's going to wait a year.
It was,
obviously it's over now.
It's over now. It waits till January. It waits, and then they do it again. They have to try to pass it again in the Assembly, and then figure out a compromise, with the Senate. And, you were the county clerk for Saratoga County before you became a state senator.
I was for 15 years.
What drove you to want to leave that safe, I don't want to say cushy, because it's not a cushy job, but a safe job to run for the state Senate?
It was a terrific job. My background, previous to being county clerk, was I was an elected town supervisor from the town of Halfmoon. Actually started as town clerk
Right.
at age 24. I was the youngest town clerk in New York State when I ran the first time. To me, all government is local, and helping people is what we should be doing. Is in this position certainly making good laws that help people, but also being out there to try to make people's lives better. And I felt as county clerk after 15 years, and we transformed the county clerk's office and done tremendous changes. I was ready to look for the next challenge.
Yeah?
Yes, and I had, of course, legislative experience as a town supervisor,
Right.
both at the county level and the Board of Supervisors, as well as the Halfmoon Town Board.
No one says
leading
you weren't
that.
qualified to run
Yes.
for Senate, but what drove you in your heart of hearts to say, this was it, not Congress, but this was the one I want?
I truly.
Maybe she will be crying. Wait a minute
How do
over
you
here,
know
right?
there?
Don't count her out.
Well, Chris
Thank
Gibson
you,
may
Rabbi.
be retiring, so.
Yeah, I know. Listen.
No, Gibson's not where I live in my
Well, you could move.
district. Yes, yeah, people do that, don't
They
they?
do.
Yes, people
Yes,
do
they
that.
do.
No, a state senator is an interesting position where I really do believe, and I do believe already I've made a difference. And if you
Yes.
think you can make a difference in people's lives, then you should move forward. I think that New York taxes too much. We borrow too much, we spend too much, and when I became senator, I was appointed as the chairman of the Administrative Regulatory Review Commission. I worked on regulations to try to reduce regulations, and we made great progress there.
Did you run against an incumbent?
I did. Yes, in fact, I am the first person since George Pataki to win in a primary election.
Well, you see, you turned the tables because he defeated Mary Goodhue,
He did.
a woman, and you defeated a guy, Roy MacDonald.
I did, by not many votes, so like 99 votes is,
Yeah.
I won the
Pretty close,
primary
yeah.
by. It was a
But-
very close race. They had to, no one could declare victory, that night. We had to wait and see how it turned out for us.
But why did you want to, at that point, run against Roy MacDonald?
There was a number of reasons. As I said, I thought the state was spending too much. I watched people as county clerk who would come in and talk about, I want to open a business, because they would file a DBA with us, and how would I do this? And I would give them a huge packet of information, and I thought, I believe that I can do better. And since the time I ran, everyone wanted to talk about same-sex marriage, because at that point that was a very hot topic. Certainly that was one of the reasons that I ran, but that was not the only reason. Throughout that campaign, I continually talked about the state of the economy. I talked about regulations. I talked about things I thought I could do better relative to public service with all of the experience that I had. But the press just continually focused in on the one issue of same-sex marriage.
But Roy MacDonald nominated you for a woman of distinction.
He did. He
And
did.
then you go ahead and run against him.
I did.
So
I
it
did,
had
and
to be,
I'm grateful that he thought me of
Yeah.
of the caliber, because the women I select for women of distinction are of high caliber with very
Sure.
accomplished backgrounds, and I was grateful for his
well,
for the award. But I did believe that I could take the seat
Do
and
better than him.
and do better.
did anyone urge you to run?
A number of people urged me to run.
Because
yes.
because you're more conservative than he was? and
Yes.
Because of the same-sex marriage? vote?
Because of same-sex marriage, because of a lot of different issues.
Right.
But yes, I was encouraged by a number of people to run, and I actually wasn't going to run. I actually was backing Steve McLaughlin. He and I had met, and Steve wanted to go forward to be the senator, and I got to know Steve and said I would be happy to help him, and he put his foot in the water and decided that it was not the right time for him, and I decided that it was the right time for me.
Well, that's nice that you didn't fight it out. In fact,
Not at all.
In fact, you're kind of close with
We are.
Steve, because even on your website, you have his picture and your picture, and you talk about how you maybe share an office or something? Or?
No, we don't share an office, but what we did, we had mobile office hours
Oh, okay.
together
Oh, that's what
in
it
our
was.
district.
Okay.
So we did advertising
what it was,
together,
yeah.
and we go out together in the community. And we actually bring our offices to the community and take a couple of hours, and
It's
we're
like a
very
legislative
busy.
date.
It's it's a really good thing to do. People are very appreciative, and they take a great deal of time preparing for us to be there. I watch people come in with typed notes that they have taken the time, that in some instances don't want us to do anything, but they want us to listen to them and listen to their ideas. And I can tell you that some of the legislation that I've actually brought forward have been brought forward by people in my district who have asked if we would bring it forward, and it's a very, very good ideas.
When you get up to debate a bill or discuss a bill, is it daunting for you? Are you nervous? Do you get butterflies? Do you?
I think that if everyone were honest, they would tell you, yeah, there's a minute there where, because a lot of it is, unfortunately, some of it is show, and the one side trying to make the other side not look like you know what you're talking about, or, you know, when it's just truly a debate, it's, you know, it's really good, it's healthy, and it's transparent, and it allows you to talk about the bill that you're sponsoring. One bill in particular this year that I never thought would be so controversial is I carried a trap, neuter, and release bill for feral cats. And I thought that that bill, and I still do, believe that it was very important to not only cities who are having a terrible problem with feral cats, but to the people who live in the more rural areas.
And what is the issue? I'm not...
There are
understand.
many feral cats, which are wild cats,
Oh, really?
who live out in the wild, in the cities, and in the country. And what happens is they have so many kittens. A feral cat, within its lifetime, could have upwards of 400 kittens, and the population is just exploding. And they're not nice neighbors, you know, and they especially, you know, so the trap, neuter, and release is a very humane way where you trap organizations. What the bill actually did was allow monies to be spent from the Animal Protection Fund through the ASPCA that you could trap a feral cat, bring it in as an organization, bring it in.
They'll do the operation.
They will. They'll either spay or neuter it. They also vaccinate it, so you don't have to worry about, you know, a cat that's out there that hasn't been vaccinated. They clip its ear, so it shows that they have been spayed, so they're not picked up a second time. And then they're released back out into the wild. What happens is they're colonies. So if you remove the cat from the colony, another cat will take its place. So by putting it back in, now you're putting a cat back in the colony that cannot produce any longer. And there have been terrific statistics that we have read both in New York City, in Buffalo, in Syracuse, of how these programs are really working. But
And so humane also.
it's very humane, but there was as many opposition memos as there were support memos, and people would split. The Humane Society of New York State was opposed. Humane Society of the United States was very much in favor of it. So it just was split. City mayors, the New York State Association of Counties, many of the town supervisors, very much in favor of it.
But it got passed.
It did.
Is it going to the governor? Is it?
It's going to the governor. Yes,
Okay.
it made both houses. I had
Who was
a
this?
very difficult time getting it on the floor. When you talk about getting it on the floor and being debated on the floor, and many of my own colleagues in the Republican Senate voted no. The Conservation League was opposed to it, as well as the Audubon Society. So it was a very interesting bill.
Yeah,
Little
no,
things that you
different
don't.
sides, yeah.
It does
So
things
many
that you
different-
don't think would become controversial can become
There you go, wow.
controversial. Yes.
So there were no cat fights on the floor?
It was kind of funny. I thought that, I would walk up to my colleagues
It's
and do just that.
interesting, even what we talked about before, the education tax credit is very interesting. And let's be honest, that there's more Jewish assemblymen, you know, they're more represented than the Senate. But it was the Senate who backed the yeshivas, the Jewish day schools, more than the Assembly. It's like, it's a funny situation
Yes.
always. Like, you never know who backs
You've
what.
got a very good representative, Simcha Felder,
Yeah,
in
sure.
the Senate. I sit next to Simcha
Simcha, really?
in conference.
Oh, in conference.
In
okay.
conference, yes.
That's why I didn't know.
No,
Okay.
you wouldn't know that. There's some inside information for
There you go. Thank you. So you don't touch? No. No. I just.
Mark.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you about the serious situation that happened up in Dannemora, Clinton Correctional Facility, and the 2 escapees. You had a proposal that you wanted to put, or possibly consider putting a chip, a GPS tracking chip in prisoners so that when they escape, they won't get far?
Well, I was on the Liz Benjamin show, and she asked me what I thought about that.
A
And
what show?
The Liz Benjamin show.
Oh, the Capital Tonight.
Capital Tonight. And she asked me that question, and quickly I said to her, well, you know, they do chip a dog, and
Yeah.
would it be helpful to the outside population? Something we should consider. And I have had time to consider that now, and at the last show that I was on, I said, I'm more in favor of using ankle bracelets. The technology is there. We use ankle bracelets on people who are not hardened criminals,
That's
who
right.
are not felony A, just to keep them in their home for house arrest. You know, there's so much happening within our prisons and people being hurt while they're there. If we knew where they were within the prisons, maybe you could just even stop a lot of the violence that occurs within the prisons if you had a system like that. But I'm not in favor of having a chip put in our prisoners.
What was your overall reaction to the escapees and the slipshod security that was going on?
Well, first of all, of course, it was fear for the people who live up that way. These were felons. These were murderers. And to have them loose is a very scary thing to occur, especially in an area where I don't even think a lot of them lock their doors. It's still the old-fashioned way of life. So I thought that a full effort was put out to make sure we did get them back where they belonged. I thought the state did a very good job in how they ran their operation.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it took 23 days, but it's pretty hard to find someone out. How would you even know? You're guessing all the time in which way are they traveling.
Well, I look
6
at it,
million acres in the Endironics
Yes.
also.
Yeah, but
right.
we had thousands of troopers and state employees looking around, and there you had the federal U.S. Border Patrol that got Mr. Matt.
That's right.
I mean, I'm thinking, we had an army of people there, and
did.
and the New York State troopers couldn't even find the guy and
It's a
kill
big
him.
area, Mark.
It was we had a lot of people in the big
did.
area.
You know
what?
But we also, but also when it came to David Sweat, they were all looking south of Malone, and he was north of Malone and a mile and a half from the border, and it just happened that someone stumbled upon him. It was a happenstance where you had this whole coordinated effort that was nowhere near the guy.
Yeah, I think it was a very.
I didn't think it was
know
well
what, I think
coordinated.
just
That's
from-
my opinion.
Okay.
Well, we'll see kind of the
I'm
state
allowed
trooper
to
you
give my
are over here,
opinion,
Mark.
that's
But
it.
I volunteer in this prison
Yes, you do.
system, and you have to keep in perspective also. Obviously it's horrible. It's dangerous for these two criminals to be escaped, but the record of the New York State isn't bad at all.
No,
They
it's
just, it's just like one instant. And there were things that shouldn't have been allowed. I mean, obviously a civilian shouldn't have been giving tools, which is against the rules. Again, you don't have to make new rules. Something is just enforce the rules that you have.
Yeah.
And to say the New York State prison system is inadequate, not doing a fair job, is also out of skew. I mean, look at it's not like every month a few guys are escaping.
But you know what?
No.
If I was Governor Cuomo and I went up there the first day to look around and go on that tour, I would have told that superintendent and this head of security, like Donald Trump, you're fired. Out now, But I mean, this would
I
have been.
think the focus needed to be on making sure the criminals were caught.
Yeah, but these
Not-
guys got
not-
23 days of pay that I don't think they should have had. I mean,
Well,
because of this.
Thank God they were there for us to do that job. And are there things that are wrong in the prison? I agree with you. There's never been from that prison a prison break. I unfortunately think sometimes, but I'm not in the inside again, that
Thank goodness.
thank goodness, because I think those are very tough jobs. I think they're very tough jobs to be a correction officer, and I'm very grateful for the jobs that they do. I don't think they're easy jobs. I
How many
think they're some of
prisons
the
do you have in your
hardest.
Senate district? How many prisons do you have in your Senate?
I had Mount McGregor, and
But you have none now?
and the governor closed it.
Make it into condos.
Yeah,
No, but-
condos would be a great idea. We've talked about that in trying to
know.
get the monies to
I
get. What a
just always-
beautiful place! I don't know if you've ever.
Yeah,
never
but
I
they
been.
have
have been
Grants
up there.
Have you been there?
It's beautiful. I always make jokes. He says,
gorgeous.
"How is it up here in prison?" I says, "You look out the door. beautiful scenery if you can look behind the barbed wire, but it is beautiful
It
out
is
there.
gorgeous. It would be a wonderful spot. We actually have been working on the prison with the supervisors. A great deal of the land has been transferred to the Moreau State Park,
Right.
which we were all very happy about, the supervisors and, all of us, because it's shared by 3 different towns up that way. But they're working very hard at trying to find a new use, and hopefully it's one that can bring in some economic development.
You had a
with
bill here about video gaming machines and disposition of revenues. And I was wondering if you had, and
Yes.
it's to amend the tax law regarding that.
It didn't get to the floor. It passed in the assembly, but
What's
it
the
didn't.
concept
The
behind it?
concept is that all the other locations, except for Finger Lakes and Saratoga, had less than 1,100 gaming machines. And because of that, they didn't need to match money to be put into their infrastructure. Saratoga, because it had 1,700, which when you think about it now with casinos, isn't any longer going to be large, has to match every dollar that comes in. And in Saratoga, it's about $2.5 million a year. The owners have to match that in order to do improvements. Not to have to match that, I think that they would be more apt to make sure that those monies were always spent to put back in. So it was asked, it passed the assembly, and
Who sponsored in the assembly?
I think it was Pretlow.
Okay.
I'm not
That
positive.
makes sense because he's chair of the committee.
But I'm not positive of
Okay.
that, Mark.
But it wasn't a Jim Tedisco bill.
No.
Because he's
it
good, in the
wasn't.
Republican side, he's good at getting bills passed more than anyone else.
He gets them taken a lot
that
from the
too,
governor, but
yes.
that's because he has such good ideas.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he does a very good job as an
I
assemblyman.
tell you, you are so charming and you're so wonderful. I'm so glad you came on the show. We had so much more to talk about. I had all these pages to talk to you about, and we never got to really
Well,
any
then,
of
Mark,
it.
you
So
just have to ask the senator back again.
Please
That's all
come
we're
back.
going to have to do.
Thank
You're doing a great job. You're like sophomore, can we say second term?
Yes, I'm not a freshman any
Yeah,
longer.
all right. So continue your good success and do it with good health for your good work for the people of New York State.
Yeah,
Thank
much
you,
success
Rabbi.
to you.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.